Hi, my name is Lauren Gomez, and I am the Curriculum and Instruction Specialist in the Early Childhood Division. Thank you for watching this webinar on the 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines PK3 Focus. The 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines are now available through the ECU Division website. Today's webinar will give you an overview of key revisions made from the 2015 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines to the new 2022 Guidelines. Although we will discuss overall changes, we will review key revisions to PK3 outcomes only. Objectives. Our objectives for today include understanding the intended use of the Prekindergarten Guidelines, the review of overall revisions from the 2015 to the 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines, including accessibility, usability, length of documents, and content updates. We will review format updates including design elements, domain skills revisions, design of the outcomes tables, and revisions to child behaviors. We will review key updates per domain, including interpretation that will assist with implementation in the classroom of PK4 outcomes only. And finally, we will review supportive documents such as translated documents in Spanish and Vietnamese, streamlined versions, and side-by-side documents. The information on the following slides will cover the intended use of the Prekindergarten Guidelines. All of the information is found in the Introduction section of the 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines. The Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines provide guidance for planning quality learning experiences for children ages 3 to 5. Some important things to note are that the Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines are designed to help educators identify the types of knowledge and skills that are typical of pre-K age children, are to be used with the note in mind that there is considerable variability in development among children, are intended to help with implementing effective instructional practices and learning experiences, and they are designed as a resource to inform decisions that pertain to curriculum and instruction. Ultimately, the Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines are not intended to be used as a curriculum, assessment tool, or checklist. They are not meant to be used in isolation or to stifle the creativity of caregivers and educators. Rather, they are meant to serve as a resource for families, educators, and administrators to provide developmentally appropriate guidance and practices around young children's development and learning in the pre-kindergarten environment. This webinar will focus on outcomes for 3-year-old pre-kindergarten programs. While work was done to remove as much subjective language from the outcomes, there are outcomes that use the child begins to or child typically uses due to the fact that children at this age are developing these skills. As stated in the statement on the slide, the guidelines are not to be used as an assessment tool, but instead to help inform instruction in the classroom. While 4 domains do not include outcomes for PK3, it does not mean that children of this age group should not participate in the experiences related to the learning outcomes, but rather the focus should be on engaging 3-year-olds in the beginning stages of exploration of these concepts. This exposure will support children to develop a solid foundation of understanding, which will allow them to build and deepen their knowledge as they continue to learn and grow. Early childhood educators of PK 3-year-old programs will still want to be familiar with the PK4 outcomes in the 4 domains to make instructional decisions about appropriate experiences and activities that could be provided for 3-year-olds. Revision overview. The 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines were created with the following revisions. Accessibility. The format was updated to meet 508 compliance. Usability. There is now a condensed introduction with primary focus on guiding principles and inclusive practices. Some parts of the introductory section of the 2015 Pre-K Guidelines were removed and will be available in a digital format tentatively scheduled to be published in early spring. The length page has been reduced from 139 pages in the 2015 version to 87 pages in the 2022 comprehensive version. Revisions to content include inclusive language for multilingual learners and special populations, alignment to kindergarten TEKS, improved clarity and specificity, which includes editing of grammatical errors and elimination of repetition, and the domain names have not changed except for adding emergent literacy to language and communication. Format updates. The overall format and style of the new pre-kindergarten guidelines includes a colorful design with icons and color style that correlate to specific domains. The overall look of the comprehensive guide was created with easy accessibility and referencing in mind. Domains and skills updates. Domain names have not changed except for adding the phrase Emergent Literacy to language and communication. You can see the example of formatting in the slide. Some skills have been renamed to align to kindergarten TEKS, such as speech production to articulation, adding, taking away to joining and separating, print concepts to concepts of print, and counting skills to number sense. Outcome table and child behaviors. Format changes to the outcomes is presented in a streamlined 2-column table, and child behaviors have been condensed to 3 to 5 examples that support both PK3 and PK4 outcomes. When reviewing child behaviors, it was the intent to list them in a scaffolded manner and to not identify outcomes specific to 3 or 4-year-olds due to the considerable variability of the development among children as stated in the introduction. It is also important to note that the child behaviors are examples that explain the competency of the outcome. They are not exhaustive of what a child may be able to demonstrate, rather they are behaviors that a child may demonstrate towards competency of the outcome. We will now review major content revisions to PK3 outcomes only. We first want to share our support and implementation plan. The webinars are designed to share content revisions that have been made in the guidelines in addition to the explanation for the changes that were made. Our pre-kindergarten guideline documents will help guide implementation and demonstrated proficiency, especially as you independently review the child behaviors. Our office hours are designed for more specific questions that will also support with the new guideline implementation. Dates are listed on the slide for February, and documents and registration information for the office hours can be found at our PK Guideline webpage. There will be additional support offered throughout 2023. Here is a table of overall PK3 outcome revisions. Key revisions are those that include changes that impact demonstrated proficiency, including specificity of skill or additions, deletions made to current outcomes. Key revisions also include combination of outcomes and outcomes that have been moved to a different subskill or domain. Minor revisions include edits to grammatical errors, clarity of ambiguous language, and change in terminology. You will see that the most key revisions occur in emergent literacy reading and mathematics. As stated earlier, revisions are not included for the following domains as there are no PK3 outcomes for these specific domain areas: science, social studies, fine arts, and technology. We also want to state that although some of the revisions we are going to review may not seem significant, we are highlighting them as outcomes you want to pay special attention to when thinking about implementation in the classroom. The social and emotional development domain has one key revision. Here is the revision for the sub-skill section, relationships with others. 1C1 changes include the addition of the use of communication skills with peers and not just teachers. This supports the skill in that communication is also important in building relationships with peers and all adults. The Emergent Literacy, Language, and Communication domain has 10 key outcome revisions. However, there is quite a bit of movement with outcomes in this section, so please refer to your side-by-side document for reference. Here are the revisions to the skill area of listening comprehension and speaking conversation. 2A2 changes the skill from following a single-step request to following a 2-step verbal direction. This change provides better alignment to PK4. 2A3 was removed because the outcomes 2A1 and 2A3 from PK4 were combined, and this 2A3 from PK3 did not align to those outcomes. However, this outcome is covered in the social emotional development domain, which is outcome 1B1A. Child follows simple rules and routines when assisted by adults. 2B2, for the most part, was changed in terms of terminology. This was updated here, and the nonverbal cues were added from 2B5. The old 2B4 was an exact repeat of 2B2, so 2B4 has been completely removed. Children was updated to peers, as you will see as a common update throughout the outcomes. Here are the revisions made within the subscale area of articulation and vocabulary. In what was called speech production skills is now articulation. The previous 2C2 was edited due to unclear expectation. Since it is not an articulation skill, but rather a phonological awareness skill, it was moved to the reading domain and is now 3B2. Changes to 2D1 clarifies the use of vocabulary through labeling and describing. Added people, places, and events as type of vocabulary. 2D3 combines the previous 2D3, 2D4, 2D5, and 2D6 to eliminate redundancy. Here are the revisions made within the skill area of sentences and structure. 2E1 was edited to align with PK4. It was removed that children only use sentences to express needs. It was added that sentences are usually in correct word order. 2E2 was edited to clarify the expectation of the skill. 2E3 was revised to align to the PK4 outcome, which is child uses sentences that combine multiple phrases or ideas. The Emergent Literacy reading domain has 12 key revisions. Here are the revisions to the skill area, motivation to read, and phonological awareness of the Emergent Literacy reading domain. 3A1 removes subjective language and provides specific observable skills. This gives more of a general opportunity to observe overall interest in stories. In phonological awareness, 3B1 was an added outcome to provide scaffolding for the aligned PK4 outcome. As mentioned before, the previous 2C2 was edited due to unclear expectation. Since it is not an articulation skill, but rather a phonological awareness skill, it was moved to the reading domain and is now 3B2. 3B3 was an added outcome to provide scaffolding for the aligned PK4 outcome. We wanted to note these two new outcomes that were added to create alignment to their corresponding PK4 outcomes. Here are the revisions to the skill area of alphabet knowledge and comprehension of text. 3C1 skill was revised to include activities that are developmentally appropriately related to the skill. 3D1 clarifies the skill as a form of comprehension through dramatic play. 3D4 is a new outcome added to align to PK4 in which a child attempts to make predictions about a text. Here are the final revisions to the Emergent Literacy reading domain. 3E1 was edited to provide clarity of expectation and to align with the language in the aligned PK4 outcome. 3E2 was edited to provide clarity and include the skill of book handling. 3E3 is a new outcome that addresses skills aligned to PK4. The Emergent Literacy writing domain has 5 key revisions. Here are the revisions to the skill section of motivation to write and writing as a process. 4A2 includes revisions that add the age-appropriate skill of drawing and exploration of writing skills. 4B2 was revised to clarify the expected outcome and to align with the PK4 outcome expectation. Here are the revisions made to the skill section of conventions in writing. 4C1 clarified the expectation of the skill from recording own name to attempt to write some letters of own name. 4C2 provides specific information about how writing can be demonstrated. 4C3 was revised to clarify the expectation of the outcome. The mathematics domain has 15 key revisions. This section includes a lot of movement and numbers between the old versions of outcomes and the new outcomes, meaning old 5A2 was moved to new version 5A1 and so forth. Here are the revisions to the mathematics domain in the skill area of number sense. 5A1 was removed to eliminate an unclear expectation. Old version 5A2 became the new 5A1 and was updated to include the terminology of row counting. Old version 5A3 became the new 5A2 and was revised to include an increase in identification of 5 objects through one-to-one correspondence. Old version 5A5 became the new 5A3 and was also revised to include an increase in counting up to 5 objects. Old version 5A4 was removed to eliminate an abstract skill. Old version 5A8 became 5A4 and was edited for clarity. Old version 5A9 became 5A5. It also changed recognition of numerals from 1 to 4 to 0 to 5. 5A6 was revised to align with the PK4 outcome of representing quantities up to 10. 5A7 was removed as there is not enough research to support the inclusion of a PK3 outcome. 5A8 is a new outcome that was included to demonstrate skill set of comparative language and is aligned to the PK4 outcome. Here are the revisions to the joining and separating skill section. 5B1 and 5B2 were revised to clarify the demonstration of joining and separating through the use of objects. Here are the revisions to geometry and spatial sense. 5C1 changes expectations from recognizes to names and describes common shapes. 5C2 changed outcomes from manipulating shapes to attempting to create shapes using manipulatives. 5C4 was revised to clarify expectation of skill and for better alignment to the PK4 outcome. Here are the revisions in the skill area of measurement and classifications and patterns. 5D4 was clarified based on the ambiguity of the passage of time, which we specified as occurring within a day, where we commonly think of what is occurring within the daily schedule. 5E2 clarifies that the skill of data collection and graph representations can take place as a group activity. 5E3 clarifies the expectation to recognize patterns and adds a skill of duplicating patterns. Supportive documents. There are several supportive resources that align to the Prekindergarten Guidelines. These include translated documents in Spanish and Vietnamese, and PK3 Streamline and PK4 Streamline versions of the guidelines as pictured below. All changes made from the 2015 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines to the 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines have been created on a side-by-side document, one for PK3 only and one for PK4 only. Technical support. We will hold various office hours throughout the 2023 year where you are welcome to come and ask specific questions about the revisions to the 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines. You can find registration information on our Pre-K Guideline webpage. If you have questions about the 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines, please contact the ECE Support Portal link on the ECE Division webpage of TEA or by scanning the QR code on the slide. You may also request access to our listserv where information about our upcoming webinars and office hours for the 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines will take place in 2023. You can request to join the ECE listserv link on our ECE homepage or by scanning the QR code on this slide. We would like to ask for your participation in completing our survey through the QR code in order to serve and support you better with implementation of the new 2022 Texas Prekindergarten Guidelines.